let me just say that I'm sure because of the proactive nature of Nigeria Magazine, I'm seeing the very huge exodus of professionals, including medical professionals from Nigeria, which has made headline news recently because of the fact that even foreign agencies are now coming into our country to recruit professionals, particularly medical professionals. I'm sure they also, as a proactive organization, decided to focus on this. So I want to commend them for seeing this as a major issue for engagement by policymakers and all stakeholders. I will try to look at brain drain among Nigerian medical doctors and its impacts as directed by the moderator. And I must, before I proceed, also appreciate previous speakers who have really gone to town to reel out the statistics. So I'm not going to dwell much on that so that I can also meet up with the time for this presentation. This is my outline. I intend to do a brief introductory definition of some of the terms. Look briefly at the Nigerian healthcare system and the medical profession. Again, a brief historical perspective of brain drain, even though Professor Ken Ife has done a bit on this. Look at the factors responsible for brain drain of medical professionals and the implications, and look again at the strategic imperatives and the options and recommendations, and hopefully conclude. Now, brain drain has been defined by previous speakers, so I'm not going to waste time on this, but essentially it involves, the emigration of highly skilled, individuals, across international boundaries, from their own country to other countries. And of course, that's basically is what it stands for. Sometimes, and most times really, is for them to earn, better pay, and of course, to have better conditions of work. So there are, objectives for the immigration. So, but essentially is a movement of highly trained, educated, or professional people from one country economic sector or field to another for better pay and living conditions. We all know who a professional is. Professional is one who is well trained, has special training and a high level of education, competent and skilled worker. And so he applies his trade for the benefit of earning some returns, which comes as wages, income, or salaries. The medical profession is that distinct profession, like many other professions, that undertakes, the training of individuals who eventually become practitioners of the profession of medicine. And they go through very rigorous course of training approved by the medical regulatory body, in this case, the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. Of course, the doctor or the physician is the individual or the professional who belongs to that unique profession of medicine, the medical profession. There are a lot more to this, but hello. Okay, sorry, it looks like, all right. Now, the medical professionals, therefore, are very significant constituents of the Nigerian health workforce. Remember, the health sector is one of the sectors of the economy, of the Nigerian economy. And so it's a very critical sector because education and health largely, inform the needs for, investments to build human capital development and, of course, the national economy. So the medical professionals are a very distinct, sector, or a very distinct group within the health workforce, where you also add other players, the pharmacists, nurses, and all others. But the medical professionals are natural leaders of the health system. They lead the medical teams, the clinical teams, and therefore drive, improve health outcomes through their work in collaboration with other healthcare providers. And so they render not only clinical medical care, but increasingly they now administer hospitals and, of course, health institutions. And like we're also seeing increasingly holding political positions to drive health agenda within the National Assembly and other legislative platforms. Of course, they also train other professionals as part of the critical elements, critical requirements for developing medical manpower, and in fact, health manpower. They train other professionals in the health sector. And of course, some go further to undertake even more rigorous, lengthy postgraduate training after the mandatory internship period and national youth service. And of course, eventually becoming that crowning glory, or if you like, the apex professional of the medical or dental profession, which is a medical consultant. So this, in a nutshell, is what the medical professional represents in terms of his qualities and his background. Now, I must say briefly that the Nigerian healthcare system and the history of the medical profession are intertwined. The Nigerian healthcare system, of course, developed, from the pre-colonial to the colonial and the post-colonial times. Of course, from unorthodox medicine, eventually to orthodox medicine through the influence of religious missionaries, and of course, eventually the our colonial overlords, who after the Second World War found it preeminently to not develop the healthcare system, because initially they came, attending only to their own kith and kin, to their own soldiers, to their own servants, but eventually the need for the total development of the healthcare system became very, very, imperative. And so from after the Second World War, they began a gradual improvement in the level of development of the healthcare system, making it move from the unorthodox to the orthodox modern practice of medicine. Like I said, the religious missionaries played a very key role in the process of course, introducing their religious beliefs and, of course, doctrines. They also had as an incentive, an alluring incentive, the provision of healthcare systems, healthcare services, and, of course, education. So, but I must say that the redevelopment of the medical sector really began during the first post-colonial development plan of 1962 to 1968. It became very important to develop this cadre of professionals in the health sector, knowing the place of human capital and indeed medical human resource in the provision of healthcare services, and of course in the creation of wealth and development, national development, in terms of the Nigerian national development agenda. And so during the first post-colonial development plan, there was a large emphasis, substantial emphasis on the need to develop the medical professionals. And that led to a lot of trainings organized because, again, the Yaba Higher College, that was first the point for training of officers, was not enough. And so you found out that a lot of them also had to be trained abroad. But unfortunately, and I think this is with respect to the historical perspective given by the previous speaker, it looked like brain drain actually started after this first set of people were trained overseas. Some of them were said, according to the National Manpower Board report of 1968, that they never returned back to Nigeria. So that seemed to have begun even this whole concept of brain drain from the Nigerian health space. Of course, the medical profession also had the same trajectory, like I said, and eventually we have moved from one stage to the other. But again, the second National Development Plan of 1970 to 1974, and in fact, the third National Development Plan of 1975 to 1980 also gave preeminence to the development of the health workforce, what we call the human resource for health, and importantly, the medical manpower needs of our country in line with the development plans. Whether that has met with our objectives, with the founding objectives, is what, of course, I would say clearly is in the negative. I do not want to dwell much on this because this is not the substance of my discussion, but suffice it to say that because of failures in various, in the health sector over the years, you find out that Nigerian health sector really is not thriving well. Like I said in the program yesterday, we're still grappling with very basic problems identified as far back as the 1945 development plan, what is called the Water Hackness Plan, a decade of development developed by even the colonial masters. Those basic challenges seem to still be befuddling health landscape. So, and it's all because of poor political commitment to health, the fact that there's not much investment, into the health sector compared to what actually people signed on to do, even as far back as 2000 and 2001. Someone talked about investment inflows. In the health sector, there's not much investment being made in the health sector. People are even investing abroad, flying abroad for all sorts of, ridiculous issues. So Nigeria is 187 out of 200. In fact, even recent figures now place it at about 197, which is not very good. And of course, you have issues of weak healthcare system, chaotic drug distribution system, infrastructural decay, and of course, poor utilization of even the available healthcare resources because of this, foreign medical trades by our political and public office holders. So there are several other issues confronting the healthcare system, and it's not a good story to tell, and that's why I said it's an unpleasant story to tell. And of course, the reasons are very many. So these are pictures, some pictures. That is not to say that there are no good examples, in some areas and in some states of Nigeria. But importantly, we look at the aggregate performance. And if you look at the aggregate performance, you find out that it's not, we're not yet there at all. Of course, the ceremony is rife. And talking about the historicity of brain drain with respect to the Nigerian, Nigerian state. But generally, I must say that from the available literature, the real brain drain, really, the first mention of brain drain was the one documented by the British Royal Society as far as 1963. It documented that there was a period in the 60s where science-based professionals from even Great Britain migrated to other parts of the world. So really it's not about, the low income, low middle income countries. You could also have brain drain from even the high income economies, the highly developed economies, because this was a classic demonstration of that fact as recorded by the British Royal Society in 1963. But in the case of the Nigerian situation, like I said, in the 60s and 70s, as a result of the development plans, it was thought necessary to develop medical manpower. In fact, manpower generally, not just restricted to the medical manpower, but a lot of them were sent abroad. And from the report of the Nigerian Manpower Board, they reported in 1968 that a lot of those who were sent abroad for training never returned. So perhaps even before the Civil War, you already had snippets of brain drain because of this tendency not to return back, having been sponsored through scholarship schemes. Because again, Britain, America, and some other development agencies, including USAID, were giving scholarship opportunities to Nigerians to train through that bilateral agreement with the Nigerian government. But importantly, brain drain became a major topic of discussion between the 70s and 80s and the 90s. And that is not unexpected because of the issue of misrule by the civilian, civilian government, and of course, further worsened by the repressive regime of the military, particularly during the period of the current president, who was the military president of Nigeria. It got to a head where professionals were moving en masse abroad to Saudi Arabia and some other places because the environment was repressive. Of course, the economy was bad. Inflation was hitting the roofs. And so people needed to move to areas where they could, of course, earn better, a better living and, of course, a better income. So the repressive regime, the misrule, the faith governance system, which likely is still confronting us as Nigerians, led to this mass movement. With respect to the medical sector, the health sector, there was an effort, surprisingly, by the Maradona himself, General IBB, to reverse this trend through very deliberate programmatic plans to, of course, get a review of the working conditions and, of course, a pay package for health professionals and indeed medical professionals. That's up to the constitution of the Atanda Fatai Williams Committee, which, of course, placed a very robust package for Nigerian doctors and other health workers. But whether that has been sustained over the years is another topic for discussion. I must say that has been reversed over the years because governments have paid less attention and priority to the welfare and, of course, the working conditions of those within the health workspace. So there has been a reversal sort of gains and the effect of due to the effect of poor governance. And of course, in Nigeria today, you know that the issue of insecurity is enough to, of course, prompt anybody to want to jump out of Nigeria to any place that he thinks he or she will be better secured. So that is, in a nutshell, is the historical trajectory, very briefly. And I will move on now. I don't know, my slide seems to be up. Okay, sorry. Now, talking about the medical manpower, yes, clearly, I would say efforts have been made over the years by virtue of the development plans. But unfortunately, even as much as we have made some progress, but the truth of the matter is that we have made progress, but whether the progress is, commensurate to the expected level we are supposed to be is another topic for discussion. Clearly, it has not met up with where Nigeria ought to be by now. When you consider the fact that Malaysia and other countries, came to Nigeria to borrow, to take examples from us in terms of how to, of course, develop their economy. And of course, they don't even have enough medical manpower as we have now. I mean, you find out that Nigeria really, in spite of all the development plans, has not been able to meet up with the expected levels. Today, as I speak to you, and this needs to be gotten clearly because I've seen several figures bandied around. The authoritative figure would be one from the Medical and Dental Council, because that is the regulatory body that registers, practitioners of medicine and dentistry in Nigeria. And as far back as April, On the register of the Medical and Dental Council, we had about 95,614 doctors. And out of this, only about 50,000 were practicing in Nigeria in terms of those who are licensed to practice. So you can see a deficit of about 40,000 from even the figures we have. And that puts us on the doctor-patient ratio of 1 to 4,000. Bearing in mind the standard prescription by the World Body, the World Health Organization, of 1 doctor to 600 population. I mean, we just saw now that Britain has 1 doctor to 300 patients or 300 population, which is even much better than what the World Body prescribed. But in Nigeria, like most other African countries, we have very poor ratios. And in Nigeria is 1 doctor seeing about 4,000 patients. That is what it conduces to. And we have only about 37 fully accredited medical schools. As at April, about 31 public and 6 private, with 6 partially accredited. And we have a graduation rate of about 3,526 per annum, which makes it about 82 per medical school. And it shows that we need about 333,333 from my estimates, doctors, to even say we are doing well as a nation based on the global requirements. So we have a deficit just now of about 283,333 doctors. So Nigeria needs, as of today, assuming other countries are not making progress, and we know that is not possible. They're not going to wait for us. But as of today, if other countries were to wait for us, we will need an extra 283,000 doctors, to meet up with the standards. And that will mean either increasing the number of medical schools to about 3,000 plus, or graduating from each medical school about 6,000 plus per year. But we know this is not even possible right now. So there are issues, there are challenges. A lot of them, of course, you ask the question, where are they? We have a register on the register about 97,000 plus. We have about 50,000 plus practicing. Please forget these old figures. The new figure is the one I projected before. So the rest are either dead or retired from medical practice, because not only are they migrating, some are retired from medical practice. They found, a pleasure in other professions and vocations. Some have migrated to the banking oil sector. They are doctors in the oil sector. Some have migrated to partisan politics, hospitality industry, and of course, the one that is in the news, immigration to foreign countries. And these countries, there are so many of them, but these are just few of the countries they migrate to. Because even within Africa, we have found doctors from Nigeria migrating to Gambia and other countries, Rwanda. So, but the one that makes the news most times is the one that talks about migration to the United Kingdom. The British High Commissioner very recently, was even very happily relaying out the figures of the Nigerian doctors they recruited from Nigeria, about 4,000 plus over the last 6 years. She was smiling and happy. I felt distraught, as a Nigerian. So as at 2021 today, as of this year, there are over 8,636 doctors, Nigerian doctors registered by the General Medical Council, the regulatory body for medical and dental practitioners in the United Kingdom. In Canada, there are several of them there. In USA, there are over 4,000. Now it should be about 5,000 Nigerian doctors in the United States. There are those in Saudi Arabia. Of course, Saudi Arabia has even made things worse for Nigeria now. They're not coming to the country like other agencies to recruit our doctors. There are doctors in South Africa, Trinidad and Tobago. I visited most of these countries, so I can tell you, we have doctors in those countries. Germany, Ireland, and many others. For sake of time, I would like to, skip. All right. Now, I haven't looked at that. There are generally factors, the factors, that determine the flow of professionals. In this case, medical professionals, are usually classed into 2, what they call the push factors and the pull factors. And let me confess that really admit that I've been discussing these issues for over 16, close to 20 years. I first presented a paper on this to the Commonwealth in 2004. And that's why it amazes me that the Nigerian government and most African countries have failed to commit themselves to the resolution of most of these issues. Because if you drive an equipoise between the push and the pull factors, you'll be getting somewhere. But what you have is a dominance of the pull factors over the push factors. The push factors are factors within the local economy, within the Nigerian economy, within the Nigerian space, pushing the doctors or other professionals away, while the pull factors are those ones that are pulling them to themselves. So what are those factors? Under the push factors, I usually like classing as number 1, poor political commitment to health. And I've seen this severally. And I'm saying this from my own leadership experience, because I've virtually led at all levels of the health sector. It's just that I've not been appointed politically, but in terms of organizational leadership, I have been involved for over 20 years, so I can tell you one of the major challenges we have is poor political commitment. Most of the leaders, political office holders, and with due respect to those who are the few that are doing well, do not see why they should commit themselves to health system development, except during elections when they rush to commission health primary care centers. So they do not fund the system. And when you do not fund the system, the infrastructural growth is not to be expected. So there's poor planning deficit as well. In most other developed economies, medical manpower needs are deliberately determined, planned for. But it looks like in Nigeria, we have since gone to sleep in terms of reorganized planning, in spite of the provisions of the National Health Act, which obligates government to have strategic manpower planning that is followed through over the years to develop some ingredients that will meet up with the expected levels. So there's also the issue of poor utilization of local health facilities. I don't need to dwell much on this because we all see it every day. Even the president of our country, President Muhammadu Buhari, has been very, very, has been a clearing example of poor leadership example in terms of utilization of local health facilities. Because one of the issues, and you get to see it later, driving, emigration of doctors is the loss of esteem. A lot of doctors now feel that, look, our leaders prefer to, go abroad to be attended by, doctors who have migrated, because it's the same Nigerian doctors abroad that attend mostly to our Nigerian leaders. So why shouldn't I also go so that I'll be much more respected in those countries? I will be able to see my president when he comes, and that gives you some level of professional self-esteem. And that has led to a lot of losses. In 2013, I blew the lead in Nigeria when I said, look, based on my statistics, that we're losing over about $1 billion annually to medical tourism. I was the one that issued that statement that led to interrogation from the government. And I had to give them the statistics. The German government came, I gave them the statistics. But now it's even over 2.something billion resources that would have been used to develop the system. All right? And that left the system worse for wear. So there are a lot of issues. I've talked basically about this, the issue of leadership, so there's the issue of poor career progression and rising level of unemployment of medical doctors. Like other sectors, the medical sector also has gross unemployment of doctors. And this is not being helped by recent, schemes by the government, where even to recruit doctors now, you have to, go for waivers. You have to get waivers from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, from the Budget Office, from the Office of the Head of Service, and that takes months to, of course, overcome. And yet you have need for doctors. So you do an employment today, you have for one vacancy, several thousands of doctors, applying for it. Where do you think the others will want to go to? They vote to their feet because they can't wait on their country that has refused to grant them employment, even for such a critical sector like the health sector. So poor career progression and rising level of unemployment. Of course, I don't need to dwell much on the socio-economic factors and uncompetitive wages. Today, the Saudi government is offering Nigerian doctors almost 10, 15 times their salaries in Nigeria, who will not be attracted. And that's why we say for those of us who have remained in Nigeria, we should also be appreciated. Unfortunately, the Nigerian government does not appreciate those who are even remaining in their country, sacrificing a lot to keep the system going. So governments abroad, UK, you saw the UK package, even in the face of COVID, bringing on board very attractive schemes to attract professionals from all parts of the world in the face of Brexit. So there's the issue of uncompetitive wages. In South Africa, the doctors in South Africa earn almost 10 times our salary in Nigeria. And that is a fact. So and that is contrary to what obtained even as far back as the 1960s or even in 2000. When you look at intersectoral, dispensation even within the Nigerian space, the medical consultant that used to earn just less than the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That is a fact. The statistics are there. Now earns less than 1/8 of the salary of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. The medical consultant in Nigeria was earning more than the justices of the Supreme Court, more than the head of service, more than even the minister and the permanent secretary, because of the critical value placed on that apex level of the medical profession. But now the man is struggling, to even survive. All these other officers are now much more than them, not to talk of even those in the legislature. So what kind of value do we place on medical professionals? Now, these are just old figures on the income by different cadres of professionals in the United States. They must have changed by now. Now, there's also the issue of lack of health infrastructure, working tools, and equipment. And of course, that leads to underutilization of skills. If I've trained in a particular specialty through my residency training program, I expect to now practice it. But I come back and I have no space to practice it because of lack of health infrastructure. Equipment in some states and in some institutions are archaic, outmoded. So nobody wants to haven't trained to that level, waste his skills in a country that does not value the need to, of course, place new skills and new equipment. I mean, if you look at some states, for instance, you'll be shocked that they may not even have a CT scan in the 22nd decade of the 21st century. And you expect a radiologist who has trained to remain in that kind of institution? It will not happen. Of course, some workplaces, I have taught workplaces, and I can tell you at times those workplaces are not fit for even rodents. They're just there, but the doctors keep working under very strenuous conditions. All of this, of course, eventually lead to poor job satisfaction. Don't forget the issue of insecurity. I always try to place that primary because that affects all Nigerians. You know, there is no Nigerian today that is safe. Every day you wake up, we all know, you wake up to the news of either one person being killed or kidnapped. This is a reality. Just last week after our national conference, a doctor that was returning back was kidnapped. And I can tell you, ransom was paid. How will that doctor look at himself as a Nigerian? Of course, once he's able to restabilize, it looks elsewhere to practice his profession, because now God has given him a second opportunity. And that opportunity may not, it doesn't think that opportunity should be wasted in a country where every day there are shouts of insecurity and it looks like the government is not doing anything about it. Kidnapping every day, murder. I mean, nobody wants to be assaulted in terms of his psyche, assaulted on a continuous basis, especially for professionals. So these are some of the issues. I mean, this was as far back as 2009 when I led a protest march against insecurity and kidnapping in Nigeria, with Edo State as a reference. I mean, I had thought that, you know, from 2009 till now, we would have some respite, but it's even worsening, all right? Now, there are other issues of quality of postgraduate training. Because of time, I'll just leave it at, you know, this. The postgraduate training for doctors in Nigeria is not as attractive as what you have out of the country, because having trained abroad, you are an international community. You have better, you know, training opportunities, better training, you know, platforms, unlike what you have here in Nigeria, where even the fees for training are rising by the day. The cost of exams rising by the day. You know, abroad in Britain, for instance, you are given study leave for so many training programs. In Nigeria, it's hard to come by. I mean, there are issues. There are several issues. You know, now, what of the objective reward scheme? We don't have objective reward scheme within the healthcare sector. People are working every now and then, nobody recognizes them. Like I said, rather than recognize them, they are recognizing doctors abroad. I'm not saying they shouldn't be recognized abroad, but when you have failed to recognize your own professionals, and you go abroad to do that in a globalized village, in a globalized, you know, a platform, people will say that, look, there is that natural instinct that perhaps it is only when I go abroad that I'll be better recognized. I mean, I had a case where one of our late presidents of Nigeria was being treated by my classmates. And they showed us the pictures of, look, Enabulele, where I'm attending to our president. It was abroad, but it was my classmate. I would know his level. So, but he had gotten that level of esteem, you know, and that drives his further, you know, career. There's also the issue of declining mentorship in the medical profession, interprofessional harmony, disharmony, and so many others. For the sake of time, poor private sector. A lot of the issues now would have also been mitigated if we had a very strong private sector. The private sector is in a very poor state in Nigeria generally. That is not to say that there are no few private health establishments that are doing well, but there are far and few in between. Largely, the private sector is still undermined. And so even the pay for doctors in the private sector is very abysmal. And where you have a very poor private sector, unable to support what happens in the public sector, you can imagine the aggregate, you know, exits that would, of course, result from that. Unlike in India and some other economies where you have the private sector now, you know, very well boosted because of the support of government. So a lot of people now even move into the private sector, unlike the case of Nigeria, where everybody is moving to a public sector that is not even able to attend to their needs. Salaries are delayed. You know, government in Nigeria are owing doctors over 19 months. I mean, Abia State government as of today is paying its doctors 19 months salary. Imo State is paying its doctors 10 months salary. Ekiti, 4 months salary. That is even the state of the chairman of the governors forum. So where is the future? Where is the hope? If the chairman of the governor's forum is owing his doctors 4 months' salary, then of course you have other states like Ondo 6 months' salary. So private sector, and of course the issue of charlatanism, the quackery situation in Nigeria health landscape is also not helping doctors to remain. There are a lot of issues, but there are also pull factors, like I said. It doesn't need overstating to say that the salaries abroad in some of these countries they migrate to, Saudi Arabia, UK, US, Canada, Australia, they are much better than what obtains in Nigeria. And so they're able to satisfy their domestic and professional needs. And of course, they're able to satisfy their family, because every doctor, like I say, is part and parcel of the community, it's part of the society. Everybody goes to the same market. So nobody is going to say, oh, because you are a doctor, don't pay for tomatoes, don't pay for salt. You're going to pay for these things, and the money has to come from your salary. So when you have better salary, you are better able to meet some of these family, individual, and societal needs. So it's an issue that prompts emigration of doctors. And these are just old figures as well. They are improved now, but you can even see at the level they were operating then some years back, you see a doctor at a certain level earning about £54,490, per annum. So no doctor earns that in Nigeria, even professors. Of course, the issue of better job professional satisfaction abroad is there. I've talked about the better postgraduate medical training, and of course, reward scheme and merits. Of course, they have health insurance, better health insurance and retirement benefits. In Nigeria, the moment you retire as a doctor, that's when you even start struggling again, because your salary just drops dramatically. And that is not good, unlike what obtains in other parts of the world. The effects, there are several, but I thank God that the previous speakers have been able to attend to most of this. Like every movement results in a widening of the deficit in medical manpower. I told you we have a Nigeria doctor-patient ratio just now of about 1 to 4,000, but with every migration, and there are over 2,000 moving yearly from statistics, the figure, the gap widens, and that doesn't help health system development. The health indices are going to be impacted negatively, because when you do not have the doctors attending to the patients in the right numbers, with the right skill content and competencies, you're going to have poor health outcomes at the end of the day. Maternal mortality ratio, infant mortality, and other health indices will nosedive. Of course, it has led to loss of skilled medical professionals. I mean, there was a time in Edo State, for instance, where there was a mass, retirement of highly skilled persons. They're still trying to recover from that experience. So when you also have loss of skilled medical professionals, I mean, you imagine the time you put into train medical professionals, the resources, and you just suddenly lose them because you have failed to look after their welfare and working conditions. You have failed to provide for their security, amongst other issues, objective conditions. You're going to have losses in various dimensions. Some with over 20 years experience, voting with their feet, you find it difficult to find replacements. And of course, it's like we are not subsidizing the cost of training doctors in other economies. That is the implication of what we are having now. So Nigeria is subsidizing the cost of training, because you train there, they move. So and they are building the economies of other countries, the health systems of other countries. Of course, the quality of healthcare delivery will nosedive, but the more skilled personnel that migrate, the more the impact on the health indices. I've talked about that. We saw that in the case of...
Sorry to butt in. How long? 1 minute, please.
Okay, 1 minute. Well, there are recommendations that I have.
Just quickly, two minutes, please. Yeah.
Let me just look at the recommendations. I've talked about the need for improved political commitment and good governance. This is key, effective leadership at all levels. This is, to me, the first reform that is needed. And that will mean adequate funding, budgeting, and leadership in the health sector. And that will, of course, will cascade into several indices. I've talked about the sustained operationalization of National Health Act. There are provisions there. Of course, the issue of establishing a health service commission. Health must be removed from the core civil service and attended to specially. Unless and until that is done, we're just wasting time. Of course, objective recognition of the value and professional worth of the medical doctor and other health professionals, really. And of course, several other things. I am also advocating that there must be a stop to this nuisance created by our political office holders, a lot of them. This foreign movement abroad using taxpayers' resources rather than using the resources to develop the health sector. So Section 46 of the National Health Act already provides for that, but it's not been implemented. It's been observed in the breach, even by the president of our country and other political office holders. There's need for improved remuneration and competitive wages to match the pull factors. And of course, need for improved working conditions, Of course, a great need for a human resource development plan, very strategic, very deliberate, and very purposeful. Of course, the law talks about that, and they need to implement that. There are several other issues: performance of the postgraduate training colleges, improved security, that is not to be overstated. That cannot be overstated. This is key, is a major challenge in the Nigerian space now, Nigerian state. And so unless and until you address the issue of security and other objective conditions of living, you're just going to be wasting time. There are several other recommendations, but I'll leave this slide for you. Talked about the issue of addressing poverty and control inflation, strong and empowered private sector, and of course, proper professional regulation with address of charlatanism. So in conclusion, I will state that despite the several contributions made by medical professionals to the development of Nigeria's health system and Nigeria's national development, their travels seem endless, with the average medical professional now virtually an orphan, faced with poor recognition, increasing unemployment, insecurity, and poor working conditions, all of which have grave implications on their development, retention, survival, ability, and capacity to deliver quality healthcare services to Nigerians. Indeed, these factors have triggered worsening trends in immigration of medical professionals, with a negative knock-on effects on Nigeria's healthcare system and national development. But we can all join hands to, of course, rebuild the system and halt the worsening brain drain with effective, purposeful, and quality political leadership, and of course, leadership at all other levels. So I thank you once again for this opportunity, Nigerian Magazine, the moderator, the chairman, and of course, all the other participants. I hope I have not bored you with this presentation. I also appreciate the tolerant people of Nigeria, and of course, all medical doctors and health professionals who are sacrificing a lot to remain in Nigeria. Thank you very much.